Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Play. This is sort of a special little bonus video as we wrap up Chapter 1 of This War of Mine. I just wanted to sort of talk a little bit about the game and mention a few sort of things that have come to light while we've been running this series. You see, This War of Mine is not like other games we've played on the channel. The purpose of the game is not purely fun. I suppose in many ways it offers an experience, just like every other game. You know, one of the arguments we have often as board gamers is the meaning of theme and how theme marries to mechanics and how it puts you into the world that the game is trying to present. And whether or not you feel more inclined towards games that represent mechanical puzzles and the theme is just a fun aside, or whether you lean more into games that present a very strong theme that can sort of engross you and take you into that world, is really sort of up to you as the player and will be reflected in your collection. But this War of Mine is a highly thematic game, and it's a highly thematic game that's not focused entirely on the fun of the players. It comes with a book of scripts that tells stories that are not necessarily exciting adventure stories, but more to add realism, to add flavor, to give you a sense, to really bring you into the world that the game is representing, which is a world of conflict and war, a world of fear, and it presents a very complex scenario. As we know, that the game is set in a fictional world of Pogorin, but it's really based on the Siege of Sarajevo, and that's not something that I really knew a lot about going into the game. It's not something that I was really aware of, and I was very lucky that a Board Game Geek user, Jasenko Pasic, reached out to me to tell me a bit about the conflict and enlighten me and sort of fill me in on his experience, because Jasenko is actually a survivor of the conflict. He was 8 years old when the war broke out in Sarajevo, and that siege of the city went on for 4 years. And the stories that have come out of that are illuminating, and it's the kind of scenario I think that is far more complex. And in our day-to-day lives, as we busy ourselves with things and, taking care of all of the stuff that keep us occupied, it's very easy to forget that can go away or fall apart or change fundamentally very, very easily for reasons that are not only outside of our control but our understanding and our influence. And so I thought what I would do is I would read a few of the anecdotes from Jasenko's review of This War of Mine on Board Game Geek. He presents a few anecdotes of his own so that he doesn't spoil the book of scripts for you. And really what I wanted to do by sort of doing this was just to sort of highlight this sort of fact. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how This War of Mine does create this unique experience. It does offer a unique experience, and it's because it's the only game in my collection that I can think of that reflects a period of real history, but doesn't present it as a fun or interesting strategic puzzle. I've got a lot of games that are historical, but they're not humanized like This War of Mine is humanized. This War of Mine is really focused on the emotional aspects of the game and the emotional aspects of the people living through this issue. And in an interesting and very clever way, it forces you to engage with the game and think about those aspects and to feel those aspects as well. And it's funny because if you watch our playthrough with Ben and I playing the game, we often find the need to sort of laugh and make jokes because that's how we're coping with the grim reality the game presents us with. And I imagine that's pretty similar to what happens in real life, not far off it anyway. And, it's funny when I was editing the series because I was looking at us laughing at these jokes and it made me feel guilty. But at the same time, it was so difficult. I don't want to sit around mourning or like it's a funeral. It's through that laughter was how we were dealing with the terrible situation the game presented us with. So I hope that you'll indulge me as I read you these stories, and then I'll just talk a little bit about some further comments. But if you want to read the full review, please find a link in the description of this video below and go and check that out because it's really very good. So Jasenko talks a bit about the different phases of the game and the different things you do in the game. And so the first phase of the game is the morning phase, when everybody wakes up and they're exploring the house and you're selecting different actions and stuff like that. And he says, "We were sleeping in our shelter. We were woken up by the loud sound of shells. We peeked outside of the basement, and there he was. Not more than 100 meters from our house was an enemy tank firing shells at the house. He was shooting randomly on our building, and although we weren't in any danger, he ruined our plans to play football that day." And then he talks about another anecdote about just day-to-day life in the shelters. He says, "My mom was a teacher before the war, so when the siege began, we decided we would have the school in our shelter. She would be the teacher, and the kids from our shelter and the shelter next to ours would attend the school. And it was official. We were back to class. One day I was at my friend's house, I can't remember why, and suddenly heavy shelling started. My mom didn't know where I was because I hadn't told her. I couldn't get back to our shelter in time, and I had to take a math exam that I had already been excused from once before. I was late, I missed the exam, and my mom gave me an F." And this anecdote relates to scavenging. "My school was the first building in the neighborhood that was burnt. The interior of the school was made of wood, and as the building burned, people rushed inside to pull the wood from the walls and rescue it. This wasn't because they wanted to save the school. This is because the wood was invaluable for heating." Finally, he talks about the night raids and surviving at night. "Atta, my neighbor, was a policeman before the war. He had a gun. During the first days of the siege, he and another guy from the building were on guard duty to keep the bad guys away. During one night, there's no electricity at night, so it's really dark. Someone aggressively came onto the entrance and started screaming, 'Open the door.' The other guard, Seyo, passed out immediately from fear. Atta opened the door and started hitting the poor guy with his gun like crazy, again from fear. The guy wanted to say something but couldn't. At one point, Atta stopped, and the man, who is now all covered in blood, just pointed to 2 large traveling bags he'd brought with him. He waited for dark to fall across the street in order to bring us food, as shelling and sniper fire were constant for a few days now, and we were running low on resources. He stayed with us for a week as shelling was hell outside. During that time we reflected. Luckily, Atta had been so afraid when the man arrived, he'd forgotten that he could have fired his gun." So, Jasenko goes on to talk a bit about the mechanics of the game and how he feels about the game and that kind of thing. And I just really wanted to sort of bring out the effectiveness with which the game captures this feeling of fear and survival aspects of the siege. And one of the things that Jasenko talks about in the review, or rather more in the comments on the review on the Board Game Geek forum, is the importance of art and culture during this time. It's about, I suppose in a way, it's about the desire to remain human despite the desperate situation, and not to lose one's humanity in the face of such challenges and difficulties. He's gone on to make a documentary film which is actually focused on a Bruce Dickinson concert that was put on in the city during the siege. It's called Scream for Sarajevo. I understand it's already had its premiere, but that it will be coming to DVD at some point this year. So if you were interested in sort of finding out a bit more about the siege or what's going on, or about that concert, please do check out the documentary. I'll put another link to some more information or to the trailer in the description of this video below. And I just wanted to say to everybody, thanks very much for coming with us on the journey of this war of mine. And I hope that while you might not have enjoyed the series exactly, enjoy seems like the wrong word in this capacity, but or in this context, I hope that you've found it to be an interesting journey, and I hope you do want to see more of it, because we're really excited to find out how it turns out. You know, we're rooting for Marin and Bruno, Marco and Roman. So thanks very much for watching, everybody. We'll be back to our normal series tomorrow, and thanks for watching, everyone.